So our spotlight this week, we are talking about a lot of Nintendo sports games, most of which were launch titles day one on the NES. So clearing out the generic titles, we've got NES Golf, we've got NES Soccer, we've got NES Volleyball, NES Tennis, and well, NES isn't in these titles, but they're for the NES, and baseball on the Game Boy. So, and did I say volleyball? I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah, you did.
Games. Okay.
Games with ball.
Let's these are in no particular order, but I wrote them down here. We'll start with Golf on the NES, came out in May of 1984 in Japan, October of 85 in America, USA. This game very much I only have two notes. It felt a lot like the Windows arcade golf game, and NES Open is the better choice. Those are my
I
two
only
notes.
have one note. It's the worst golf game we've played.
How long did you play it for?
A hole.
Longer than me. I mean, I couldn't get it on the green. So I played it longer than I want to admit. And I was using the rewind feature and everything. I could not get that ball on the green to save my life.
Yeah, it's not a stellar example of a golf game.
So kudos to you if you've got skills in this game, because I do not.
This was the first golf game I think I ever played, and I was actually a pretty big fan of golf games as a kid. I think it was mostly like playing like PGA Tour on Windows PC. I remember having like PGA Tour 95, things like that. This one I remember being so boring because it's so like slow and it's a little bit cathartic, similar to some older NES games. Very unique that they used that they used these models in Wii Sports and Clubhouse games. I don't know if that's Nintendo being cool and nostalgic, or that's Nintendo being, lazy and just using the same ideas over, but I thought that's a cool idea. And for an update, speaking of Animal Crossing, NES Golf, NES Soccer, and NES Tennis are all on Animal Crossing on the GameCube that you can get in the game. So that brings our total to 10, which is pretty cool. So we've done 10 of the 15 NES games that are available on the Animal Crossing GameCube. And I was just thinking
Are they
too,
all
like
on Switch Online?
that are
Are all 15 from Animal Crossing available on Switch Online?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I didn't put the list on here. But I think we're close. I'm trying to remember. Like,
There's probably one that
is Clue
isn't.
Clue Land on Switch Online? I'm trying to remember, but
Yes, it is.
okay. I can't remember if we did it or I came in also late to this podcast a few weeks, so
We have not clued yet.
right. So like Clue Clue Land is on Animal Crossing, and it's on Switch Online, and we haven't done it. So we're at least getting close. And I was just thinking too, like, not to derail the spotlight games too much, but wow, 15 NES games on the GameCube, like built in, was a really big deal at the time. Just like it was like almost like having your own like little tiny online service. So, anyways, let me see. For this one, I put golf at 92, and I enjoy some of these games, but they're pretty low on my list. I don't know if we're doing
I put it
rankings
in
one by one, but I put golf at 92.
I put it way down at 112 on my list. I just couldn't figure out how to play it very well, and obviously that's not gonna. If I can't play a game, I can't enjoy it very much. So Yeah, it's right below Earthworm Jim and right above Donkey Kong Jr. So that's the company it's
At
keeping.
85, I don't know what it's chilling with, but it's the game that plays you.
And
Uh,
then next on the generic title list, we had uh, Soccer for the NES, which this one impressed me. I felt like this had more going on for it than I thought it was going to. It reminded me of it was better than most football games I've seen for the NES. And I don't know, it looked like it kind of had a lot in common with Techno Bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that. I
I see it.
mean, Tecmo Bowl is more fun, but I get what you're saying. It's like it's soccer, that's kind of a big one everywhere.
You
So you
could
want to put
move
some
around the
effort in.
field easily. Yeah, it's the pass function was understandable. I mean, for a game with
Yeah,
two buttons.
Yeah. Yeah.
it functioned pretty good for a launch title. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And there's quite a few soccer football games on NES. This is being the first one, and I'm gonna say at some point, talking about all these old games, is that I think all three of us are looking at these games through a certain lens, understanding that
Yeah,
they're very early on in the system, and um, many of them are very like innovative to better, in my opinion, or our opinion, sports titles that come later on in NES,
yeah,
like NES Open Golf. Speaking of Tecmo Bowl, uh, I I completely forgot about Tecmo Soccer Cup, and I was watching some gameplay of it last night. And Tecmo Soccer Cup for North America came out in April of 1992, and wow, it's so crazy to think about NES games that came out that late, because at that point in 92,
Yeah,
they have
Super Nintendo's out. Yeah,
yeah.
dominant Super Nintendo and Game Boy, and they were
that too.
still
Yeah.
and they were still kind of releasing games. Um, my One of my favorite parts about early Nintendo games are like I want to know who like as I want to know like as a group did they decide what the sound effects were going to sound like?
Hmm.
So like when you're like in NES soccer, when the goalie kicks the ball, it's like it's like
Mhm.
a who decides like a ball kicking sound is like who decides that, you know?
Yeah, they definitely hadn't fully explored the sound chip there. I think a lot of it is the fact that I always get confused when this subject comes up, but you have to talk about it when you talk about NES launch titles. Is there as again, we're not Nintendo experts, we're just Nintendo fans, and I know there's some difference between the Famicom and the NES. And I think the Famicom was a little had like a worse sound chip in it or something, and that's what a lot of these are coming over from. I could be wrong about that, but um yeah, I don't think the Famicom could do as much sound as the NES could.
Yeah. Or who
It's
decides
possible.
like in NES baseball, like when you're running and it's like bloop, 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 bloop. It just
Yeah, they sound like Atari sound effects, really.
yeah, it's just all very silly, but it fits into like the overall themes. You certainly feel like you're in a Nintendo world when you play these black box uh,
Mhm.
sports games. So, like probably everything else on this list, there are more fun options, I think. I think there's better paced soccer games
Yeah,
on the system, but hey, all credit given to this one. This one is lower than golf for me. This one is
Oh,
94 for me.
I had it higher
okay.
than golf was I think one of my lowest ranked ones in this collection. I this one I ranked higher at 98. It's I had a pretty good time with it. Like I said, I was impressed with how for a game that's more complicated than golf, you would think. You have more
Yeah.
players, more going on. I thought that this was more intuitive. That's the word. It's much more intuitive than that golf game was. So 98 puts it right below Dig Dug 2 and above Solomon's Key.
So
An
I put
NES
it at
trilogy there.
number 82. I had more fun with it than I was expecting, but it, didn't blow me away. So
Mhm. And then we had Tennis for the NES. That came out in January of 84 in Japan and October of 85 in USA. I think this game's actually a bigger leap forward in technology than we realize. When you consider that a lot of people at the time, their most recent memory of a tennis game is Pong. And I
Mhm.
realized that the industry had made steps in between. Like there was a game called Tennis on Atari 2600, and it looks kind of close to this one. But I don't think many, there was the video game Crash. I don't think a lot of people played that. So yeah, I think as far as tennis games go, I think this is more of a leap forward than our modern brains are going to be able to comprehend. um,
That's fair.
that said, it certainly fits in with the rest of them as an early step.
Yeah. For this one, I give a lot of credit to like you can do different shots in this game.
Mhm.
So um the mechanics on that end deserve a lot of credit, but I think um the mechanics between, and you can see it on the screen now, between you either got to make the ball faster or you got to make the people slower, because I think it was very ambitious and very innovative. Again, like if you're going off Pong, they didn't really have much of a foundation to go off of. But like, I think this game is way too uneven for me to enjoy for like a long period because the people are just so fast in the game. So either you got to make something faster or you got to make something slower and just even it out. So
Mhm.
similar to other games, innovative, deserves lots of credit. Has more detail than I would expect from a game uh,
Yeah.
from from this time. Yeah. Sean, what
Yeah,
Yeah,
else?
I
I mean,
ranked. Oh,
out of the four NES games, I ranked it the highest of what we
oh,
did out of the
okay.
five. So I put it at 76 just because, I don't know, it just felt like a tighter experience for me
Hmm.
than the other games.
I put mine
Yeah, I
right at
ranked it
95.
one above. I put it
I'm
one
sorry about
above.
that. Go ahead.
Okay, uh, the other golf game that we played, NES Open Golf. I put it because golf games I'm not too big on. I think we can say that for sure at this point. Except later on when we get to like the Mario Golfs on Nintendo 64 and that stuff. But early golf games are kind of a struggle for me. So if there's no like gimmick to it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
put this and it's right below it actually boosted up Congo's Caper, which was like one
Oh,
of my
wow.
bottom 3 for the longest time, and now Congo's Caper is all the way up at 106 out of 122. So um oh no, Spanky's Quest was the one that I dumped at the bottom. Never mind. Spanky's Quest is still down at 117. Confused the two again.
And, and
As we
mine's
do.
and mine's at 95. I put it right below. These are all pretty close together for me. But I don't dislike any of these games though. As I said, I just think
Mhm.
there's better options.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
For
multiplayer. Like if somebody wanted to play these with me, I'd be like, "Yeah, sure. Let's laugh at
Yeah.
how outdated it is," you
y-
know?
right. For most sports games, there's going to be better options on the online service. But again, like it's just like a different, like just kind of, it is just a different kind of era, you know.
Mhm.
You can very much break up the NES into like two different generations, you know. And if you view, I think if you viewed it that way, then it becomes much easier as well. Is like the difference between like NES Baseball and Bases Loaded is
Yeah.
huge, or golf and open golf, which I just realized is a huge gap on my list. And Sean, it must be a huge gap on your list too between
Oh
NES
yeah,
Golf
yeah,
and open
absolutely.
golf.
I think it's funny the next NES one is not a genre you see too often anymore.
So
It's
next up is Volleyball for NES. Came out July of 1986 in Japan, and this was not a launch title. It came out in March of 87 over here. This game, it felt like it should have been in with those launch titles for sure. I don't know
Yeah.
what was going on there. Maybe they just do you guys think there's an audience for this? I think that might have been part of the delay. Like, I don't know how much
I
demand
don't
there is
know.
for a volleyball game.
That's what
in
I'm saying.
Especially in
It's
'87 when you've got like
yeah,
Metroid and Super Mario Brothers and
I'm not sure though,
yeah.
but like there was certainly an audience for sports games, and
Mhm.
their games didn't sell as much as they do now. But was beach volleyball a thing in the '80s? I really don't know, because
I
they
think
I
this
did.
feel
was
like
almost a holdover from the Atari way of
it could
thinking
have
of
been.
things where they were just
Yeah.
like put it out, put it out, put it out, you know, and the market got flooded back then, and I think this is almost like it's not the market being flooded because they were like, well, this game's been play tested and it works, but I felt the least is in control of it. Speaking of it works, barely. Like out of all the games we played, I could control this one the least.
It's not the only.
Volleyball has like the weirdest like gap in like tastes, I guess, because you have this, which is the most basic rudimentary version, and
Mhm.
then later in video games you have the Dead or Alive volleyball, which is on the
Yeah.
creepy end.
Mhm.
But there's like no middle ground. I guess maybe Olympics. I don't know. So I
Well,
have no idea who this game was for.
NES did have a a number of volleyball games. Like if you want to play a volleyball game on NES, Kings of the Beach is way better. It's way better. So there are volleyball games on NES. So I just thought, perhaps there was an audience, um, you know, similar to NES Tennis. I think NES Volleyball would have benefited the most if you would have changed the perspective around to where you're not looking at it from the side, you're looking at it from behind your own team. Um,
Yeah.
I I think that would have helped the controls a lot. So to where you're moving laterally, because of course,
Yeah.
if you're actually playing volleyball, you're actually moving laterally. So that would help my brain in this game. Can we address the obvious of this game?
What's that?
The
That you don't pick your team?
Well, actually, that's a good one too. That's actually a good one as well. Yes, you pick your opponent's team, which is very strange. You don't pick your own team.
Yeah.
But also the movements in the game. I put in the notes that they hit the ball with their heads and they twerk. Like they're constantly just like if you see me in the video, they're constantly just they're like moving their back and forth. You saw it, you played it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this one the least out of the bunch. I ranked it all the way down at 118. It's right below Spanky's Quest, right above Donkey Kong Math. So, I guess I'd rather play this than Math. That's my takeaway.
I put it
I
at
put it at 83 because golf still was insanely dull compared to it. So
I put it at 99. I'm kind of just working down
okay.
this list. I'd play the other sports games slightly above it. Uh, Not a bad game. Nothing else to say on this one.
Yeah. And then lastly, we had a holdover because we'd reviewed baseball on the NES, but we didn't have baseball on the Game Boy on the service yet. So baseball on Game Boy, it's very comparable very comparable to the NES experience. In fact, in some ways, it feels like a visual improvement, which is crazy
Yeah.
being on the Game Boy. It doesn't feel like that NES one had that, just like these other titles. Like I keep going back to Atari, but it really does feel like you just had those Atari games where it was like the same map and you were just kind of changing the color scheme type
Yep.
thing. This doesn't have that. So this was a very much welcome change of pace over the others. Oh, it came out in August of 1989, by the way. I forgot to say that.
So it's funny this was on the portable system because technically it leaps and bounds over its NES counterpart, which is insane. But
Yeah.
because it's not like it has like a different control scheme or something. Like it plays better. I thought it was more fun. I kind of like that you could do the Game Boy Color version of it. It
What a
has the weird
difference 4
novelty.
years can make, you know?
I know, of just hitting a ball with a stick, except now you can do it with 4 AA batteries. So
Hmm.
no, I enjoyed this one the most out of the 5 of them.
Yeah. And I'm probably different just in that this is the lowest for me, but not a bad game, I don't think. And I'd play the NES version over this one only because I find the camera to be frustrating sometimes.
Hmm.
Like it's definitely visual improvement. There's lots of welcoming additions, like just like adding like batting averages, things to add to the immersion. But like
Name.
right, but like when the ball goes to the outfield and like the camera is not moving at that same speed, again, it's hard for me to imagine that I would play it longer than like a game, which is fine. Which again
I'll agree with that because I
is
did
fine.
end up ranking it close to but lower than the NES baseball.
Yeah,
So I agree.
yeah. So I definitely do like it, and I have so much nostalgia for handheld baseball games. Uh, for sure.
Mhm.
Very yeah. It just it falls into how I feel about a lot of early how I'm sure we feel a lot about a lot of early Game Boy games.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, it's just something so of the era about that, like that original Game Boy being the size of a brick. It looks like a tool. It doesn't look like a toy. Like they had that, like the Game Boy colors that they released down the line had all different colors and shapes to them,
Yeah,
and even transparent. That original one just is so, it's there to do its job, and like
it's a lump.
you have a very specific image of, like, just like the average Joe could pick this up and play this baseball game, if they were a baseball fan and not necessarily a video game fan.
Yeah.
So you know what it is? It's something like you could totally see like Homer Simpson playing this game. Like a Homer Simpson type would play this.
yeah, and last thing I want to say overall is that I would want to give Nintendo credit on just the fact that I'll say that NES Volleyball is way too difficult. It's just way too difficult to actually try and
Yeah.
score and win. But the
That's
fact
why I
that
ranked it the lowest. I was frustrated.
the fact that there's no difficulty settings on any of these games, right? I don't know. The
Mhm.
fact that the NES
Yeah.
games don't have difficulty settings, and I think the difficulty is pretty good, like moderate, like not too easy. Sometimes it's too difficult, but that's expected for the era of gaming that we play in, and that's really hard to do. I mean, like, there's games now that have millions of settings and they can't get their game
Mhm.
correct. So,
Yeah.
they had one shot to do it. There were 17 launch titles for NES when it launched in North America. After we do this last ranking, I want to hear which launch title game would you choose for NES? Um, if if you were around in October of 1985. But real quick, I put baseball. This one at 100 is ranked about 10 below where I had NES baseball.
I had it just below NES Baseball. So my list goes NES Baseball at 65, ice hockey at 66, and then the Game Boy Baseball at 67. So it's clumped in with those.
I had it at 65, so I had fun with it. But
Oh,
again, we've
almost
played
almost exactly where I had it.
Yeah. And
so original launch title I'd pick, huh?
right, I put it down at the bottom of our list here. Now there are
Ice Climber.
there's at least
That's my answer.
Clearly,
one obvious
clearly.
one on here. So you can choose two if you want to.
Well,
Um,
I'm assuming Mario Brothers came with the system, so you're asking me what other launch title
okay,
I'd want.
right.
Yeah.
So there were 17 in North America, and let's just exclude Mario Brothers from that because
Yeah.
let's just
We
assume
all got that
we
for
all
Christmas.
got
So
that
what do we
game.
get with it?
What else would you get?
I'd go with Ice Climber, although I do remember having a lot of love for Hogan's Alley, the light gun game, but I don't know. I think Ice Climber is my answer.
I'm gonna go with Wild Gunman.
Oh, maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. Is Hogan's Alley a light gun game?
No idea.
No idea.
I'm doing a check on that right now.
Okay, I like that answer. I can't remember.
It is. It is. Okay. And it was the one I was thinking of, so I stand by my answer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Childhood you did not fail adult you.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have chosen in 1985. Like I want to say baseball because I feel like okay, like I got my platforming game. I'm gonna want a sports game to go with that. Like some that would be fun. Um, but Excite Bike would intrigue me as well. Like especially back then when there was no there was no Mario Kart. Um, but also I don't know if Duck Hunt is also obvious because
Hogan's
back
Alley's better than Duck Hunt.
his like
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
I
true.
get so if any of our listeners don't know, Hogan's Alley, it was this interesting light gun game that was almost set up like as though you went to instead of putting you in a fantasy world, it set it up more like you went to the shooting range and you were actually shooting at these like cardboard cutouts of people that had like targets painted on them and they would flip around and almost like that scene in Back to the Future 3 where he shoots at the ducks or things like
Yeah,
that. Like
yeah.
they would pop up in the windows and stuff like that. They would pop up over the fence. So yeah, it was like one of those light gun games. It had a little bit more going on than Duck Hunt.